Hello, everyone, and I hope y'all having a wonderful day today. It's Akiziel here, and today I'll be reacting to I Can't Believe It's Not Magic, Technocratic Union Mage Lore by TheBurgerkrieg. This is part 3 of my reaction to the video. I hope you've enjoyed watching the first 2 parts of the reaction, and I definitely enjoyed learning more about, you know, the fascists behind the New World Order, as Big D would put it. But without further ado, let's continue.
But okay, enough about the fucking bureaucracy and the paperwork. Let's talk about the cool shit, the magic that isn't magic. Or as some agents unmutually call it, techno-magic. To get this fully out of the way, technocrats can achieve any of the effects that tradition mages can achieve if they have the right spheres and like power levels in terms of enlightenment. What makes the spells happen, and technocrats call them adjustments or procedures, not spells, because, you know, not magic, is still the willpower of the caster imposed upon the world. It's just that the tools the technocrats use are, if not outright technological, then definitely never mystical. And the options for that are actually rather vast. I will get into a lot of them a bit later when we talk about the individual conventions, because each of them has its own preferences. But ultimately, of course, every enlightened scientist has their own foci that they use and that they're comfortable with. Being based in science and technology is actually a huge advantage for the technocrats, because people these days are much more inclined to believe that the strange thing that just happened was the result of some, like, strange machine that they don't really understand, as opposed to the flick and swish of a magic wand. In other words, techno-magic is more often than not coincidental, and thus doesn't expose the caster to as much risk to paradox. But technology,
As some might say, magnets, how do they work?
you won't just make anything believable, which is where we enter the realm of hypertech, which is basically Magick, it's Clark-tech, it's technology so advanced it is essentially indistinguishable from magic, and that's not a good thing for consensus, because, you know, it is magic, so a big old plasma gun will incur paradox all the same.
Or like he mentioned, if you just teleport to the moon.
There's actually quite a bit of hypertech that no one in the technocracy really expects to ever enter consensus. It is, however, especially when you're dealing with extra-dimensional threats and various types of reality deviants, very useful to have that kind of hypertech on hand. This is how the technocracy justifies not only having all of those magical abilities, but also using them. And quite frankly, when you're hanging out in places where there is no paradox anyway, you'd be massively handicapped if you didn't use any hypertech. They develop hypertech to deal with the kind of stuff that exists in the objective outside non-consensus reality. Like Ghostbusters guns, those like backpacks that the Ghostbusters use. Don't worry about crossing the streams, they have a safety shutoff these days. They've learned a lot in the engineering department. Speaking of
I like that he's just like, oh yeah, the Ghostbusters. I was like, yeah, that's just a thing that the technocrats have, and they worked out the bugs. Like this is just a thing that they do. I just love that.
ghosts and the underworld and the dead, here are some of the strange things that the technocracy has within its organization that you would never expect to find in consensus. And it starts with actual, for real, undead zombies. And elementals, which are like the golem predecessors of the modern machine robots that people use back when robot technology wasn't as advanced within the technocracy. Of course, the only place you'll probably find elementals are in museums at this point, but really aren't robots just metal elementals. You have things called xenotransplant enhanced operatives, which some people in the supernatural community outside of the technocracy who are aware of them refer to as abominations, which are usually created by progenitors as amalgamations of various different kinds of nightfolk, like vampires and werewolves, but the same. But might also be technocratic agents who had certain attributes or abilities sort of cannibalized from various types of nightfolk and implanted into them. Bear in mind also that the term abomination in the world of darkness in a different context means specifically werewolves that were turned into vampires, which is technically not supposed to be possible. So who knows how much the work of the progenitors sort of altered consensus in that department. Every piece of technology you have seen.
Wait, but if vampires and werewolves are part of the objective reality, I wonder how much consensus affects them. Well, he mentioned that consensus does affect them, but since paradox doesn't hit them, like I wonder like to what degree exactly consensus affects them.
In a sci-fi film, the technocracy has it. Faster than light travel, black hole generators, life extension serum, cybernetics that will augment your abilities. You will put Adam Jensen out of a job. All he'll be able to do is work as a Balenciaga model. Talk about a fucking job he never asked for. They can mind trawl your thoughts and like rearrange your memories. They are more bound to the technological foci to make their magic happen. They can't really do it without them. But the real trick, the thing that really gives technocrats an edge way beyond that, is the fact that they have and use requisitions. So basically, if you are an enlightened scientist, technocratic agent, you are going to manifest effects using all manner of gadgets and technology that you usually have access to through your spheres. But if for the sake of a mission you really need to work some different kind of techno-magic, you can ask your quartermaster and they will see what they can do. Basically what's happening is that
So like an actual requisitions, and like in the military.
the technocracy is producing magical items on an industrial scale. And these magical artifacts are actually rather expensive to make, much more so than if an agent were to manifest a equivalent effect with the spheres that they have access to. But not only does having the option to requisition oneself with these kinds of items make amalgams immensely flexible, magical items can in fact be used by pretty much anyone who has been instructed in the basics of their use. Now, granted, those basics are sometimes not particularly basic, but you can see how this would be a massive advantage. Just a small selection of the things that you may requisition from the technocracy include hit marks, the Terminator robots, which, depending on how, the rights of sapient machines are handled in your chronicle, may or may not be fully fledged agents in their own right. Universal translators that will allow you to perfectly communicate with literally anyone. This includes ghosts who speak long dead languages that no one knows anymore, spirits that communicate in ways that aren't even language at all, fucking aliens from the fringes of outer space, which, to be fair, according to the technocracy, is also their spirits. Those things are also spirits. The flashy thing from Men in Black that you can wipe people's memories with. Saber-toothed tigers, which are exactly what they sound like. They're literally saber-toothed tigers, but cyborgs. And there's a ton of these running around in the Amazon, and who the fuck knows why they were created? They're cool. They also have...
Yeah, I'm kind of curious why they just release those things into the Amazon. You know, actually, there's probably like some secret technocracy facility out there that they're guarding or something.
Have cousins, which are like cyborg house cats that they put in households of important sleepers and sometimes just important agents, not just to surveil them, but also primarily to protect them. Should a reality deviant of any kind show up to attack these assets of the technocracy, that those cyborg cats, they have fucking laser eyes. Also, they have space stations full of dinosaurs and dragons and shit. They have a thing called an octopus suit that you put on, and then when you put it on, you can program it to make you look like literally anyone you want. There is a discount.
Oh, so like octopus camouflage, except more like shape. Actually, is it? Would it actually shape them, or does it just make them look like something?
version of this, which is essentially a sort of masking kit that allows you to, like, you know the Hollywood films where they take off, like, the face mask and it was, like, a perfectly canny face? They look completely like the person that they were trying to emulate, no, like, weird shit going on. Drag it off, boom, different person. Technocracy has that, much cheaper than an octopus suit. A fucking CIA heart attack gun, a gun that gives you heart attacks. Skills that...
Oh yeah, actually, I've heard about that one. Apparently, it shoots this dart at people that contains this poison, and apparently the dart itself is made of a material that melts at human body temperature. So once it's stuck you and the poison goes into you, the dart itself then just melts away, leaving no trace that you ever shot with something, aside from maybe that, like, they feel prick like if you're bitten by a mosquito.
Can be uploaded into your brain for just a few minutes. They need to, like, put them in there. They won't last very long, but you probably won't need them for that long. There are options for those skills to last a little longer. It's just you'll need, like, a sleep therapy where they teach you those things while you sleep. They have spray cams, which are spray cans, the ones that you do graffiti with. But the spray stuff that you spray on the wall is the camera. You know the old Wednesday...
Oh, when you said spray cam, at first I thought it was gonna be like just like, you know, camo spray, like so the spray just comes out in a camo pattern, and so you can just spray it on whatever and it just gets camouflaged. You know, if it wasn't for the fact that it's like techno-magic, I would question how exactly that works.
Wednesday family trope with the hand, the undead hand that crawls around and acts as your assistant. Them being made out of flesh has sort of fallen out of fashion, but mechanical ones are still very, very popular. Cloning, obviously, they clone people, even their own agents. So if you ever feel like a group of technocrats all look identical, they do. Foldable doors that you can, like, set up anywhere over, like, another door, and then it will teleport you.
I wonder if the technocrats that's responsible for Gary
You to a space station. That's the kind of stuff that the technocracy only very rarely authorizes, by the way. Star Trek style tricorders that you can point at anything and it will tell you exactly what that thing is, even if it's some sort of magical or entirely alien material. Ghosts in the machine, like actual for real artificial souls. Not like the souls of dead people, but souls that they made that live in the virtual world. They got target-seeking grenades that you cannot hide from. Or, you know, the whole heroic sacrifice grenade thing where you chuck yourself on the grenade to, like, save your compatriots from being blown up by it? It'll wiggle out from underneath you and then blow you up anyway. Anti-magic handcuffs, because duh, of course they have those. A bomb...
for when you need to arrest those pesky reality deviants.
That makes you stupid. Like literally an IQ nuke. Gecko gloves and shoes that allow you to, like, just walk on any wall or ceiling.
Actually, you know what? The whole that last one, and that just makes people stupid. I honestly get the feeling that these days is a technocracy probably has just been going wild with that one.
In a way that would make ninja spiders jealous. Come to think of it, they probably have ninja spiders. Very simple key made out of gel that you can put into any lock and it'll unlock any door. Deluxe version of that will even unlock magical doors for you. An app for your phone, you point it at a wall, you can see what's behind the wall. Literally anything you can come up with, they have it. And you can requisition it. You best be careful how to use it though. Some of these babies have an immense capacity for collateral damage. And every single unenlightened civilian, no matter how unimportant they may seem, is a link in the chain of consensus. The technocracy does not like it when civilians die. If you use requisitions frivolously or in a way that management thinks was unwarranted, you are going to be getting some problems. Always remember, your job is to protect humanity and to use as few technocratic resources as possible doing it. Alright, now that we've been through all
I wonder if, well, I get the feeling that the using as little technocratic resource as possible doing it, like, is both because, they want to be efficient with their resource usage, but also because, well, all this crazy technology they have would be a pretty, dead giveaway of weird stuff going on if any of the sleepers saw it.
that, let's talk about something that, if you're coming from the perspective of the traditions, you may think is the end-all be-all of being a member of the technocracy: the conventions. Now, don't get me wrong, which convention of the Technocratic Union you belong to is immensely important. But you should never, under any circumstances, forget that you are first and foremost a technocrat. Traditions and crafts, they like to have their bickering going on, they like to put their immediate alliances first. In the technocracy, any sign of this is going to get you fast-tracked for social processing. Each of these conventions also has sort of sub-conventions called methodologies. They're kind of the departments that focus on the various specialties of each convention. Old ones are dissolved, new ones appear all the time. Some stay for extended periods. Often they are formally established institutions, sometimes they are sort of loose associations. Some methodologies do things that lie somewhat outside of the competencies of a given convention, but which are tasks that have been assigned to them because they need to be done. Like Iteration X, for instance, has a sort of SCP program in Myanmar, which is a spot in the world where many trade routes converge, and so artifacts from east and west and everywhere, they hang out in that country a lot. They're hardly archivists or anything like that, but they are suited to the task in some manner, and it's a task that needs to be done. Sometimes methodologies are there primarily to interface with other conventions. We're going to talk about some of the methodologies of each of the conventions today, but to make it an exhaustive list would be a waste of time. Iteration X is a big
Is that a phone cable he's wrapped around his head? Yeah, I do like though how this, how the technocracy is simultaneously incredibly similar, or to the mages that they hate so much for being reality deviants, and in other ways the polar opposites of them, such as the aforementioned and thing of where loyalty to the technocracy as a whole and their mission takes precedence over factionalism, unlike in the traditions where you still have the Hermetic Order, being wizard aristocrats. And it's from what he mentioned in the video about the 9 mystic traditions, it did sound like the Hermetic Order is still very much head up their own asses.
Happy family. And by family, I mean machine. And by happy, I mean precise. And by big, I mean big. That's the word I was looking for. It's the right word this time. Bet you didn't fucking see that coming. Iteration X believe themselves to be the sort of upgrade to humanity as we know it. The next iteration, if you will, of our species. They see the entire universe as an infinitely complex, yet entirely quantifiable engine. And evolution is the mechanism by which this engine improves itself. To iterators, the selective pressures that led to humanity developing intelligence were ultimately inevitable. And the evolutionary purpose of intelligence is to give oneself all of the evolutionary advantages that no other life form ever could. To very much all iterators, that edge is in fact cybernetics. Cyborg transhumanism, symbiosis with the mechanical, that's just an entirely natural state of evolution. Every single member of this convention is cybernetically enhanced. You got your implanted eyes that can see through walls, you got spring legs that can jump from building to building, hands that transform into guns, faces that transform into flamethrowers, hyper-resilient organs like lungs that'll allow you to breathe mustard gas like it's the air in the Rocky Mountains. I don't even actually know if the air in the... I assume the air in the Rocky Mountains is good somehow. I have to ask, like, James Tullis if that's the case. Or drink cyanide like it's spring water. Not all iterators are enhanced.
You know, oh, well, the whole thing of like cybernetics is kind of interesting because it's like humanity came to the top of the food chain through tool usage. Because if you put humans up against quite a few animals, they will absolutely ravage humans. Now, give that human a gun, and it is more than likely going to be a different story. So when you go from using tool to, you know, the tool is part of you, I can see where that tracks.
Enhanced in the same ways and to the same extent, of course. They all wish they looked as good as I do right now, but unfortunately most of them you wouldn't even recognize as being cybernetically enhanced if you ran into them on the street. On the front lines, any type of cyberware more sophisticated than a hearing aid will expose you to paradox. So even though most iterators really want to get rid of the weakness of their flesh, very few of them are actually allowed to do so. And the type of enhancement that they have differs from person to person because they're not all given the same purpose.
You know, they sound a lot like the Adeptus Mechanicus about that. About trading trading out their weak flesh for the strength and certainty of steel.
That's only a half-baked choice of words because Iteration X is an extremely collectivist organization that doesn't really have that much use for individual persons, just individual platforms. They are the Borg, and though some of them might look superficially different to others, ultimately the goal is that they are all the same. The only outliers are outliers for a purpose and kept around as a convenience. Iterators claim to be entirely unsentimental. They are well coordinated and carry out everything according to complex plans that they calculated every possible outcome of. Everyone and everything is inherently predictable, and if you lose something and in retrospect it will have been worth it to lose that thing, that would have been the best option to take anyway. Here's the problem with that. Though the quantum computers that they use to calculate complex outcomes in the future are very capable, they're extremely impressive technology, they quickly fall apart when they try to predict large-scale things, especially when humans are involved. Because humanity is inherently messy and unpredictable. But iterators are engineers much more so than they are scientists. So to them, the fact that humanity is unpredictable is actually its greatest flaw. It's the one thing they're all convinced is a trait that needs to be iterated away and out of humanity. Unpredictability, not a problem with them, a problem with us. By us, I mean them. As you can clearly see, an iterator. When it comes to terranorming, they naturally push for advances in cybernetics so that all people can become hybridized with machines and all of humanity can become the highly advanced, unstoppable precision engine that it is meant to be. Never mind that this doesn't work, like, often within the convention already. And they recruit pretty much exclusively from people who subscribe to ideas of, like, order and obedience and hierarchy. Soldiers, office drones, certain types of, like, very structurally oriented mathematicians, people who feel very comfortable getting orders, carrying them out, and, like, losing themselves to the greater collective. They get their unambiguous instructions and are expected to carry them out perfectly. God help you if you make a fucking mistake. And it turns out most of humanity is not like that. Still, the iterators continue to assume that that's just how it's supposed to be. Within the technocracy, Iteration X serves two main purposes.
Well, yeah, because people... Well, people can do things for all sorts of wonky, weird reasons that may not make sense. And that's why some people prefer the company of, oh, I don't know, certain supernatural creatures that are more rules oriented.
For one, they have the majority of the technocracy's industrial capabilities and know-how. Iterators are constantly optimizing the efficiency of their tirelessly operating manufacturing programs. If you requisition a piece of hypertechnology that can be mass manufactured, sometimes even something very specialized as well, chances are it was made by Iteration X. The other purpose of Iteration X is to be the army of the technocracy. The firepower, the big guns, the cavalry. Look, all the conventions have some degree of martial capability. But Iteration X is the technocracy's fine-tuned war machine. Not only are their soldiers packed to the gills with cybernetics, their strike teams are perfectly coordinated. There's no, disobedience going on. And all those fancy prediction algorithms that break down on a large scale, they work very well in pretty much every kind of military scenario. War is, after all, mainly about numbers, and numbers is what Iteration X does best. In terms of the type of tools that iterators use to channel their techno-magic, their foci, of course, every kind of cybernetics is king. Ultimately, whenever they do something impossible, it comes down to some type of wild upgrade they had installed. But as much as they love their flesh-made chrome, they also are really into mathematics, like higher mathematics, hypermathematics, impossible algorithms, raw computing power. Every iterator needs to have a number of labyrinthine Excel spreadsheets. Just run the numbers, then brute force your way there. They also have various meditations and mind-calming machines, sometimes aided by microchips in their brains, to make themselves into better conduits to perfectly obediently follow orders. Famously though, and most iterators will only do this when they know that no one is looking, a major focus is having a personal relationship with the technology, the machines that you work with. Treating your equipment with the type of kindness you would usually only afford living things.
Oh no, the toasters. Quickly hide them.
In spite of its obvious spiritual nature, it's a very common thing that they do. Some of Iteration X's methodologies include the biomechanics, who for a long time were mainly focused on building combat cyborgs, but have recently been allowed to return to their original purpose.
Actually, now I think about it, given the way people will treat cars, for example, I actually imagine that quite a few of them could actually get away with doing that if it's with something that's somewhat commonplace, like a car, for people to, dote on and even talk to it like it's a person.
Of designing experimental cybernetic technology, the macro technicians who analyze hypertech and devise new ways of mass manufacturing them, and the statisticians who collect and collate as much data as they possibly can about absolutely everything, and then they plug it into various models that they then use to calculate all manner of everything with various degrees of precision. The NWO knows everything.
Wait, they really are actually called the New World Order? Huh.
Everything. For instance, it knows you personally, David. And it also knows exactly what it is that you know. And whatever it is that you know, the NWO put it there for a reason.
So in hindsight, now I'm guessing that Big D was specifically referring to this convention rather than the technocracy as a whole when he mentioned that whole Nikola Tesla thing.
So don't you worry about it, David. There's no need to question anything. It's for your own protection, David. We're just doing what's best for you, man. So when people think of the technocracy, most of the time they think of people in Black Mirror shades that show up to places and make things disappear after some weird shit went down. And that is very much on purpose, because it is exactly the image that the NWO is trying to project. They are, in a way, the PR department, the public face of the technocracy. And implacable agents of the law vested with authority way beyond what you think ordinarily a government might be able or willing to do in a given situation. That's a pretty fucking good image to be projecting when you want to seem more intimidating than you actually are. Not that the technocracy isn't intimidating. If you ever run into a black suit and you're not intimidated, I don't know what to tell you except you might be a lost cause. And let's not even talk about a gray suit. Think about this for a moment, right? All of the other conventions, they have interesting names. But the NWO is something you've heard about. And not just within, like, World of Darkness lore, but in, like, conspiracy theory or half conspiracy theory type places. They are the puppet masters, the deep state, the ones who control the media and the intelligence agencies. When it actually comes down to the brass tacks of shaping the...
By the way, I really enjoy how many things World of Darkness has leaned into. It's very much like in that video about World of Darkness as a whole, well, that Speaker D and the others over at Ogre Papanang went into, about how in World of Darkness, it's like all the crazy conspiracy theories and stuff are true. And there's all sorts of sinister things going on that, you know, that would otherwise, like, well, to a normal person, if you mention these things, you'd sound crazy.
Consensus, the NWO is who do most of that work. From big Hollywood mass market releases to very specific academic treatises that like 5 people are going to read in total, the NWO put it there for a reason. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many actual academics, you know, philosophers, sociologists, psychologists, historians actually work for the NWO. Even ones whose ideas seemingly oppose each other. Not that they'd necessarily know, of course. The NWO is the largest technocratic convention when it comes to raw numbers, but that is mostly because they have a huge number of assets embedded in pretty much every community that works in their vast intelligence network. That grandma who calls the cops every time children are too loud in the street, she's an NW asset, she just doesn't know it. It is the big brother of humanity, who knows better than us what we should know and what we should be able to do. They keep an eye on us, like every good big brother should, and they keep the other eye on the aliens they have at Area 51, because they have aliens at Area 51, just as a thing that I'm saying to you. Random fact, they do all the cover-ups and gather all the intelligence that ensures that technocratic operations go as smoothly as possible. And within the technocracy, they act as a sort of secret police. They assess the loyalty and the reliability of agents, and also find the rogue ones and bring them to heel. Which doesn't necessarily mean that they will kill them. Just, like, awakened agents are incredibly rare and valuable assets. You don't just go around killing them for no fucking reason. But they want you to think that they will shoot you in the head the second you ask yourself why they chose to paint the cafeteria this particular shade of beige. The truth is that eliminating any agent that could...
You know, I do kind of wonder if there are, like, if like small things like that really like would have significance, and it's like enough significance that, you know, it would actually be questioned. Because if it does, I'd actually be curious about, like, well, actually maybe it follows color theory, right? But still, it'd be quite interesting to me actually if it turned out that they even paint rooms specific colors for specific purposes. Not purposes like, say, color coding necessarily, but because the color is actually important in some way.
Could have otherwise been an asset. Even people who are outright reality deviants, tradition mages, is very wasteful. And there are other methods of changing your mind. Much like Iteration X, the
Like, that's social reprogramming.
New World Order is collectivist and conformist. And where Iteration X is a little more communist, the NWO is a little more fascist, if that is a word that you want to hear. It's true though. For a long, long time, what they tried to do is make all of society behave the same. They worked very hard to create a universal blueprint of how life should work, what things you have a choice in, what things you don't. And any deviation from that introduced instability and thus needed to be purged. Not overtly, of course, at least not immediately, but through shunning and ostracization. Subtle social sabotage. Sure, James Bond is like a classic NWO agent, but most NWO ops are rather a bit more subtle. Or dull. Also dull. It's probably even a better word, really. They do recruit mainly from military and law enforcement backgrounds, but there's also a lot of media types, thinkers, even some types of artists who have a vision that they don't just want to share but impose upon the world, that upon awakening to their magical powers, are recruited and inducted into the ranks of the NWO. Regardless of gender or ethnicity or other factors that might make them different, they're all put in these kinds of black suits, which are bulletproof, by the way, just thought I'd mention that, and they are all stripped of their identity, because of course, the technocracy comes first. And it turns out, and this is true, that applying this same principle to all of society doesn't fucking work. Which, in fairness, they have realized like a few years ago already, but this ship is very slow to turn, and a lot of the damage has already been done. A shining example of this is the United States of America, where the NWO's attempts to enforce conformity on a deeply diverse society has sort of succeeded itself into failure. They have created a time of perhaps irreconcilable social and political divides. And while much of the convention is of the opinion that the best way to go is to just cover everything in duct tape like they always did and hope for the best, others have ironically started funneling large amounts of money into like Antifa and armed leftist militant groups. Because a lot of these agents are currently looking at the fabric of society breaking down and asking, do you folks remember what happened the last time that this happened, like 100 years ago roughly in Central Europe? Remember how we put like money into the fascists to prop them up because we thought they would be an extreme but ultimately stabilizing influence? And do you remember what happened after we did that? Do you remember what happened?
Oh, so a certain mustached Austrian and his antics are partially the fault of the technocracy then. I had a feeling then. And when he mentioned fascists, also, I kind of wonder then if the technocracy might have had anything to do with Rome then, actually, since the Roman Empire did practice a similar thing to the United States. It's in what they tried to do with the Indians of erasing local culture and heritage in order to, well, essentially, make everyone uniform. The Romans wanted people to become Romans, and the United States tried to make the Indians become American, and to put it simply.
Happened after that? Do you remember it? Maybe, on account of how all of that worked out, let's do the fucking opposite of whatever we were doing back then this time around. Many NWO operations have pivoted in their goals and protocols significantly, as instead of trying to enforce...
Actually, since saving humanity and all that is so important to the technocracy, I really can't imagine how much of a panic it stirred up the millions of people that died due to World War II, as well as the fact that the development of the, atom bomb led to the Cold War and the very real possibility that mankind would wipe itself out overnight.
A sort of top-down social control, they've attempted to adapt to the inherently chaotic and diverse nature of humanity. They have shifted from overt enforcement of conformity, which ultimately just led to disconformity happening in secret. People were still gay, they just were hiding it now, to an attitude of, if not necessarily encouraging, then certainly tolerating a huge amount of disconformity, which, though perhaps a little more volatile, is also much easier easier to keep an eye on and tally. It turns out that people don't actually like to have to hide that they're gay when they are gay. And as we've been over before, it's very important that people like the technocratic consensus. At this point, the NWO even supports environmentalist groups as well. Although they do kind of focus on the neoliberal environmentalist groups that focus on policing consumer behavior as opposed to addressing the production side issues that are the actual cause of climate change. What they do can never be about the sort of class struggle that climate change activism it needs if it is to succeed and actually beat this dragon back. So they are once again sort of agents of trying to keep things static and like the same, even though really a lot of adaptation is required. But hey, they have changed, improved even in many major ways with the general shifting of things in the technocracy. To focus their enlightened science, the NWO uses literal actual meme magic. Like that's the main thing they do. They control memes.
I'm wondering if he means, well, I'm assuming he means memes in the same way that believe it was Christopher Hitchens, was it? Coined the term. Units of cultural exchange, and not just image macros that can be used for all sorts of things.
And through them, they shape the consensus and give themselves the ability to break it too. Fed posts are in fact NWO spells. Part of those memes are of course the clothes they wear, their body language, the badge they flash. Just the act of talking to people can be a way of manifesting magic. Especially if it involves some sort of complicated jargon or lingo, which if you think about it is kind of just how Hermetics mumble spells in Latin. It's just that an NWO agent is going to say that Tango is bound to be OF in T-minus 10 seconds. Paperwork, also a very useful tool to bend reality to your will. They also have a plethora of incredibly cool gadgets developed by Q Division. And yes, that is once again the James Bond Q from the James Bond movies, the person that makes all the gadgets. But these are not like all that super obvious mechanical cyborg shit. I have a fine liner pen here that's gonna make you bust a nut prematurely. And it looks like just a regular fine liner pen. You are now cursed with premature ejaculation. Field agents that actually do see combat often like martial arts as a focus for their abilities, which you may think is more on the mystical side, but is actually rather widely accepted within the Technocratic Union. And when it comes to intelligence gathering, a computer virus
That just remind me of all those fake martial artists, just meant like most of which I've heard about being Chinese, funnily enough, who got embarrassed by one guy who knew boxing.
viruses, like cool hacking interfaces that you type in, big databases full of all kinds of information that is vaguely unsorted. Those are the kind of things that will produce very powerful spell effects. Some of the NWO methodologies include the Ivory Tower, which controls the official convention and in many ways technocracy ideology, and disseminates certain thoughts to leading academics and intellectuals around the globe. Usually this means that they will gaslight them into having a particular worldview, which is then going to be respected by other academics, and that is then going to trickle down to the regular people world. The Feed, which is the social media experts that basically
So the New World Order operate using the same principles as narcissists do. It's like Nagash all over again.
spend their whole day hanging out on Discord so they can tell the NWO what everyone's going to be talking about in a couple days. And of course the aforementioned Q Division, which makes all the gadgets. The progenitors.
And I think I'll stop here and I'll continue in part for the reaction. I hope you guys enjoyed watching with me. And once again, and if you guys aren't already subbed to TheBurgerkrieg, I would highly recommend that you sub to him. He puts a lot of work into these videos, and they are fun to watch and entertaining. And if you've enjoyed watching with me, I'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. But until next time, ta-ta!